It all revolves around perception. Perception's grip on our delusion is quite powerful. Perception is not, or sanya, it's a much more preferable term to use, sanya. It's a lot more than just perception. It's all of the mental associations we have, including memories, which is the phenomenon of memories as we go back to it. That's the thing which keeps us holding on to the past. When we hold on to the past, it's not just the memories we're holding on to also. It is the way we like to understand the world, which ties in with the wrong view that many of us possess. Miccāditthi. So this takes us back into the loop of the Noble Eightfold Path. Sammaditthi is the antidote of Miccāditthi. So please don't think in form of compartments. That's where the Noble Eightfold Path is, and I'll apply them when they become relevant. They're always relevant. Don't think of the 4 parts of right effort as being something that it's like a medicine cabinet I'll reach into whenever I have a headache type of a thing. I'll refer back to them when I need to. These are ongoing processes that need to happen. It's almost like in terms of physiology. Think of all the metabolic reactions. We call it metabolism. All the chemical reactions, if you put them into one, underneath one umbrella, you get metabolism. And that includes respiratory system, circulatory system, all of the neurological processes taking place, digestive, you name it. And that's what keeps a healthy body ongoing, alive, healthy. But what I noticed many times taking place in the mind of the meditator, meditating, even diligent meditating student, is we like to simplify things and put them in their own compartments, and we refer back to them as we see fit. Meanwhile, life is happening. When we come across the 3 trainings, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, we think of them as, oh, they are sequential, they are linear. First, I'll focus on Sila, and when the time comes and I feel like, okay, I've graduated, then I'll start applying. When I am ready, that's when I start applying the mental cultivation, or bhavana, meditation. And then we talk about panya, and panya is, oh, for many people, it's like so abstract out there. Perhaps I need to know all the suttas, and then somehow a revelation happens, like, no. These are all joined together beautifully. I began speaking on sanya. Sanya is the biggest deceiver. If there is a Mara and you're of the mindset that, okay, there cannot be any other beings than just human beings and animals, fine, don't worry, you still will cover that area by simply looking at sanya, and they will do the job beautifully to keep us in delusion. Sanya comes in the form of memories, as I mentioned, but also in the way we look at ourselves in terms of habitual tendencies, which I refer to again and again as sankharas. Sankharas are very, it's hard to grasp. They're very difficult to become tangible, conceptually at least. Yesterday, as we were being taken back to our place where residents, and I was looking as we were caught in traffic. I looked over and I see this mound, this beautiful area. It's a gated house. It's the front yard of a house. And there were several trees. And the trees had these intricate, dense, thick, almost like hair, stretch of roots spreading everywhere. And I looked, but I couldn't help but point to all of us in the car. I said, look at the sankharas. People actually think that they're going to go after sankharas and they're going to actually remove them almost surgically by all the tools that we have in the Dhamma. Oh, I'm going to use the Noble Eightfold Path. I'm going to use the right spiritual or psychic basis of psychic power. I'm going to use this. I'm going to use that. I'm going to use the Satipatthana to remove them. That is an impossibility. Lord Buddha indicated a shortcut, and that is by going after sannyas. In the Sutta Nipata, in the Magandhya Sutta, Attakavagga, in the book of the eights within the group of discourse in the Sutta Nipata, Magandhya Sutta, Lord Buddha says, Sanya virattassa nasanti gantha. For the person who has detached oneself from relying on sanya, perceptions, mental associations. This must be this, therefore that should be the case. I feel this way because all these things. Reliance on sanya, the person who has cut that cord, for such a being, there can never be any shackles anymore. There can never be any gantha. Gantha are the bonds that shackle a person. When you look around, when you look outside, when you look at humanity, even at animals, we are all trapped by our sannyas. And if you go and ask each of us, they're going to say, oh, well, there's a reason. There's a reason I am like this. There's a reason why I am behaving like this. And I am doing this because of that reason over there. Sannyas are the ones, well, they are the veils that have been pulled upon our sight. That's why a person, when Lord Buddha says, Jnana Dassana, I was mentioning to one of you today during interviews, Jnana Dassana means to have the understanding and the sight of Dhamma. You yourself. That means you have penetrated through the veil. You see, for a brief moment in time. It's interesting how when they talk about the noble disciples, the Sotapanna, the very first stage of Arya Savakas, early teachers have described it as a person who's going on a long journey and has heard about this mountain summit, as this almost mythical, legendary mountain. Could you, less noise please over there. So the mythological mountain almost, but that's enough to have been moved by the story, they've been inspired enough to say, I'm going to go looking for this. I'm going to find this. I'm going to die trying. So the Sotapanna is the person who is on this adventure, and as they are climbing on this very treacherous path, on this climb, as they're turning a corner, suddenly they get a glimpse of the mountain summit. Across somewhere, they see it between the clouds that just opened up, but it's enough of evidence for them to know they're on the right track. It's enough for them to know they're on the right track. So, what is then the case here that the person is penetrating through? So cute. Yes. It's sanya. The more they penetrate, the more they trust. The more they trust, the more they penetrate. Penetrate through what? Wrong view, miccāditthi. That is when the person has been established in right view. When you read about them in the suttas, when they say right view, that is basically referring to a Sotapanna. So cute. The Sotapanna. Now, as they climb up and up, they see a little bit more details. And the Arahant is a person who has summited, has gone to the top. So, why sanya? Why am I referring to the sanya portion? Earlier we were talking about the Pancha Upadana Khanda, the 5 grabbing aggregates. What we hold on to. It really doesn't matter where you start from. That's why Lord Buddha presented us with the 4 satipatthanas, the 4 foundations, establishments of mindfulness. You can pick any angle to start. You can start from any part of this climb towards the mountaintop, if we want to continue on that analogy. So there is a point where the practitioner continues developing and gets to a point where they are no longer mesmerized, interested in perceptions. Despite the fact that perceptions, we're saying they're the bad thing, like we were talking about the Dhammapada verse, Gahakaraka ditosi, gunagehang nekahasi. Oh, house builder, I have seen you. Oh, architect, I see you now. Ditosi. You will never build any more houses for me. It's done. That was the exclamation that Lord Buddha made. For years, I thought he was referring to Mara. He was addressing Mara. It's actually, he was referring to Sanya. His own Sanya. So, today's sutta is a carryover in a sense. I like to use the word carryover because we were talking about yesterday the Tatiya Anagata Bhaya Sutta, which is the 3rd part of a series of talks that Lord Buddha gave on the fears or terrors that are yet to come. In it, he was mentioning how in the future, today, that was today he's referring to, bhikkhus will stay away from talking about shunyata. Many people have thought that in the original teachings of the Buddha, we don't have that. The principle of emptiness. Oh no. I used to believe that myself. Until I went into the suttas and left the canonic commentaries behind. So we saw how Lord Buddha is referring to how people will avoid the deeper suttas. Not the, as I mentioned briefly, the Sigalovada type of suttas here and there. Not that it is a mundane type, but compared to deeper suttas that are pointing at the level of the mind of an arahant. Because ultimately, Lord Buddha wants us all to become arahants. So the suttas are there. He gave these discourses to help us to become arahants. So let's not forget that. So based on that, I chose for today the Cūḻa Suññatā Sutta, which does not get to be covered in discourses. So we're changing that. So today I will go over, by the way, it is uploaded, the PDF. It's fully downloadable, and it's on the website mindreleased.com in the Pali Suttas section. So this is the Majjhima Nikaya 121, MN 121. Cūḻa means short or shorter in this case, because the one right after is the Maha Suññatā Sutta. So this is the shorter discourse. That's what the Cūḻa refers to. Suññatā or Shunyata is the emptiness, sometimes translated as nothingness. It really doesn't matter. Basically, it's the absence of something. And we're going to see what Lord Buddha is referring to. And so a shorter discourse on emptiness. Yes? Not just the conditioning, but the question is for those of you not hearing, because we don't have a mic other than this one. The question was from Brother Tio asking, the Sanya refers to perception and associations. Yes. So I like to use, instead of the definition of perception, which is very delimiting term for Sanya. Sanya is a much bigger, it has a plethora of different meanings. Under the umbrella of Sanya, basically, we have, how I translate it is mental associations, which includes perception, which also includes, like Sister Lim was saying, sensations, but also it includes memories. So Ajahn Mun used to refer to them as memories, as well as some of his students. So memories, if you think about, well, when you are meditating and you're observing your thoughts, we are always trying to latch on to something of the past. Well, how? How will you get a visual of the past if not through memory? So you need to throw your hook somewhere into the past to latch on to some type of an experience you've had, usually something that has had a powerful emotional signature around it. And because we have this thing called negative bias, usually that refers to negative states, painful specifically, feelings. So now you have a knot, a tight little knot. Remember the gandha that Lord Buddha was saying in the sutta? Gandha, in this case, could be seen as a knot. So the next portion of that verse, by the way, from the Magandiya Sutta is, so I said, Sanya Virattassa Nisanti Gantha, for the person who has been detached from sanyas, there cannot be any shackles, knots. The second line of that verse says, Panya Vimuttassa Nisanti Moha. For the person who has been liberated through wisdom, there can never be delusion. You see the connection between sanya and delusion, moha. Webu Sayadaw would say how we develop fear, worry, and all the other sensations, all the other feelings, emotions, because of these few things: liking, disliking. I like this, I don't like this, and I don't care about that. I'm indifferent about those things. Suddenly, we develop certain emotional attachments to things. But all of these things start from perception, from sanya. And when you're practicing sati, what are you really doing? Whether you're practicing breath, whether you're practicing metta, or any of the other kammathanas, any other meditation objects, if you're truly there, earlier I was saying which foot's heel is touching the ground. You paused a moment and then you said, the left foot, Bhante. How did you know? You just became aware. That is nama rupa. You became, the mind knows its object. Nama rupa. As you're doing that, during that moment of sati, there cannot be any kilesa. There cannot be any lust. There cannot be any anger. There cannot be any moha, meaning liking, disliking, moha, delusion. And so if somebody comes and asks, or you ask, why am I practicing sati? Well, what's the point? Because if you're genuinely there with the breath, if you're genuinely there with the metta, it is impossible for you to have kilesas in your heart at that moment. But every time we're going in and out, as the mind is always struggling, holding on to the object, hindrances are coming and going and coming and going and coming and going. We fall in and out, all in and out, in and out, in and out. So now it becomes a struggle. That's why I want you to always practice the relaxed step instead of jumping back to the object the moment you notice a hindrance. That's not going to teach you anything. You will definitely not have panya. And you will definitely not see that mountain summit. So stay with your object, especially those junction points that we talk about in the Satipatthana with the 4 body postures. When you're sitting, when you're about to get up, about to is huge. That's a transition point. That's so much going on there. But we're like, no, we don't care. Am I walking now? But because Lord Buddha talked about sitting, walking, or standing too, and lying down. Okay, those are the only times I need to have sati. Who said that? Venerable Ananda became an arahant, full-on arahant. In the junction point, right before his head hit the pillow. He was so exhausted, he's like, okay, he wasn't trying to sleep. Sometimes people misinterpret that. He was just exhausted, he said, because Lord Buddha said, you can also practice. You need to practice while you're lying down on your right side. He said, because his feet were killing him, and he was over 80 years old, Venerable Ananda. And he was struggling so hard to become an arahant. His virya was through the roof. His adhitthana was through the roof. His heart was open, and he was embarrassed because he was letting down Lord Buddha himself, because he had not become an arahant while Lord Buddha was alive. And now they were about to have the first council, and he is the repository. He is the library of Dhamma himself. And he's letting down the whole sasana because everything is riding on him. He had a photographic memory, you know. So talk about pressure. But his half-brother, Venerable Anuruddha, was very compassionate, as well as Venerable Mahakassapa. They were very supportive of him. They came and they said, it's okay, you got this, you can do this. You were with our Lord, the Lord of the Dhamma. Don't worry, trust. But you have to be persevering. Your virya has to be like laser beam, sharp. And he was able. But how? He sat down And he said, let me lay down on my right side as I maintain sati. That's the junction point. He became an arahant at that junction point, that transition, that window from sitting to lying down. So every moment is a perfect moment for you to enter Nibbana. Perfect example is Venerable Ananda's example. But I don't want to deviate too much. And I would like us to just jump to the sutta itself. Theo, did that answer your question? Okay. But the sutta itself will elaborate more as we go on. Okay, so I will, before the ice melts. Joe. Compliments of Myanmar. Yes. All right, so let's begin. Majjhima Nikaya, middle length discourse is 121. Cūḻa Suññatā Sutta. Short discourse on emptiness. I have personally heard this. At one time, the Blessed One was staying in the palace monastery donated by Migara's mother in the city of Savatthi at the Eastern Grove. I've mentioned to you before who is Migara's mother. Well, I mentioned it several times. Do you know who it is? You do. Okay, I'll because you will come across the sutta, and there's other listeners as well who might not know. Migara's mother is a man, was a man, is actually the father-in-law of Migara. Actually, no, Migara was the father-in-law. Mother was his daughter-in-law. So if you can do the math, it doesn't make sense. There's a story behind it, because the daughter-in-law was already a noble disciple. She was a Sotapanna. Her parents forced her. She came from a very, very wealthy family. So, as was customary in India at the time, perhaps even today, the parents wanted her to marry someone of the same level, status in society. So they didn't care that much about what Lord Buddha meant to her, because she insisted that she could not marry someone or a household that did not respect Lord Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. But finally, she gave in, and but under the condition that her father was going to supply her with a group of elders, elders from her clan. Because she knew in her heart of hearts that sooner or later there's going to be some issue with the in-laws, who were devout, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Jains, Mahavira. And because they would walk around naked, those ascetics, the Ajivakas and Paribhajakas. So she didn't want to do anything with them. She didn't want to offer them food, this and that, and her father-in-law, because they used to live together. So she goes to this other village where the palace is, and she lives there. So she's being forced to offer food to these people that she does not consider Sangha, because their lives don't reflect Sila, Samadhi, Panya. On the other hand, every time she wants to offer food for the bhikkhus that show up at the door, her father-in-law throws a fit and does not allow her to offer food. And if she's going to offer food, it better be some type of soiled food or something. So in disrespect. But there's also the disrespect that if she doesn't do it, her father-in-law is going to really get upset. So you see the family schism or difficulty uniting and living under one roof. So there's been several occasions where the father-in-law is really upset. And he loses it one day when she goes to in front of the door and there are bhikkhus. And because the bhikkhus know who she is, because they know she's a noble disciple, some of them. And then she turns and she says, Bantes, you must forgive me. My father-in-law, who is the patriarch of this family, is enjoying yesterday's food, and he is not able to share what he has in front of him to offer to the Sangha. Of course, it's much more beautiful and than what I'm paraphrasing here. But essentially, don't expect to get any dana, lunch dana, from this household, because the father-in-law is simply enjoying yesterday's fare, yesterday's food. So the father-in-law is very careful what's going on, and he hears this and he's like, okay, you're out. Because you insulted me. You're saying that I eat spoiled food, yesterday's food, because they're so rich. How could you say that? And she says, hold on. Remember the elders? They live with her. She calls them over and she explains everything. There were other 2 incidents at least. So she calls these things out and she's like, my father-in-law thinks that I insulted him by saying he eats yesterday's food. But what he doesn't understand is, by yesterday's food, I mean my father-in-law today is very rich because of good, wholesome actions he committed in his past lives. But I've been living with him all this time. I have not seen him yet doing any kusala kamma. No fresh food. He's eating yesterday's food. Look around you. How many rich people do you know? Personally or especially through the media, the mainstream, the social media. You see all these billionaires, people who are competing to become trillionaires. How many times do they actually really do something nice without the cameras being there? They are all enjoying the Queen of England, the King now of England. When was the last time he actually did something good, really good, to people without having any kind of reward waiting for him, just for the sake of doing good? It's just one example. We have people in our own lives who are much wealthier than us. Do they do things in this life now? Just a question. So in hearing this, Migara, the father-in-law, realizes what mistake he had committed. And he gets down on his knees and he bows to his daughter-in-law. And he says, from now on, you will be known as my mother, because you have given life to me. And he took on the Dhamma. He became a student of the Dhamma. So every time we are coming across Migara's mother, we are talking about her. Make sense? So, by the way, her name was Visakha. So sometimes you hear her name, you see her name, Visakha, but oftentimes the palace of Migara's mother. And I've been there. It's now a small home, but outside there is the remnants of one of the Ashokan pillars, which the local Hindus thought over time, because there's been an earthquake or somehow it was cut down, brought down, and it looks like chipped off like Shivalinga in the Hindu tradition. So they thought that it is a Shivalinga, but it's not. It's an Ashokan pillar. So they treat it as a Hindu temple, but the Buddhist society, I guess, also has some type of a joint ownership. So inside there is a small hall, and there's a Buddha statue, there's a caretaker, this and that. It's in the village. It looks like someone's home. It's not like Savatthi, Anathapindika's part. But you can walk from one to the other. It's a lovely walk, and you can almost feel like, oh, this might be the path that Lord Buddha used to take. Because she built this palace for Lord Buddha to come and stay. And so that she can get free Dhamma talks. So, anyhow. So that's Migara's mother. Then when it was nearly evening, the Venerable Ananda came out from his meditative seclusion and went to the Blessed One. It's around this time, the afternoon. So they've been meditating after the dana, after the Pindapada. So sitting after a few hours, meditation. They come out and like, okay, so they might have some questions, like we're going to see now. And they had the great fortune of having Lord Buddha there to clarify. So he went to the Blessed One, and after paying his respects, he sat to one side and said, Bhante, I remember one time when the Blessed One was living within the Sakyan district at a town called Nagaraka. The Blessed One himself spoke to me these words and said, Nowadays, Ananda, I primarily practice the meditation on emptiness, on sunya or suññatā. Bhante, did I hear you correctly? Was I recalling and relating back accurately to the teacher what the Blessed One had spoken to me himself? For I do not want to be misspeaking the words of the Tathagata, nor misrepresenting him. How many students today approach a teacher and say, did I understand you right? In fact, whatever we think the teacher said, we just go ahead and shoot it out into the world, into social media, this and that. There's no questioning. There's no like, let me check. Let me check proper way by going to the source. And all these serve also as a method of proper behavior, protocol, proper protocol for the bhikkhus especially, to check. We don't check anymore. This was happening also at the time of Lord Buddha, let's not forget. You have countless, well, not countless, there's several examples of bhikkhus who were misrepresenting Lord Buddha. And they were even going around and teaching people with so much confidence. Yeah, I heard this from Lord Buddha's mouth himself. And then Lord Buddha, you see him like, come over here. Is it true that you're saying these things? He's like, yes, I said that. Like, where do you remember me ever saying this? And the person, they usually droop their heads down and like, like a little boy, and they feel horrible. And then Lord Buddha really tears them up over there with words like foolish man and things and chastises them. But this is the proper way of doing it, to check the source. Indeed, Ananda, as in the past, now also I primarily practice the meditation on emptiness. This is the kind of sutta that Lord Buddha was saying in the future bhikkhus won't be talking about. And that's a terror. So that's why we're trying to balance the equation. Ananda, just as you see here in this palace monastery of Migara's mother, which is empty of elephants, cattle, horses, gold or silver, empty of any assemblies of men and women, yet nevertheless, the non-emptiness or presence of something else, namely, the Sangha of bhikkhus is here, the only single presence here. So he's using the outside conditions to demonstrate something much more subtle, meaning the state of mind. Because it's very difficult to describe suññata to someone who has a mind full of sannyas. So how do you use? You use examples with elephants involved. So is there an elephant in this room? Let's look around. None. Not even a picture. Okay, we all admit, okay, so this clears the mind of any elephants. So slowly, you move. You see this again and again in Lord Buddha's analogies and similes. He moves from a bigger, grosser image to a more and more subtle, to guide, holding the hand of the meditating student, slowly. If, in most cases, that's the case. But then you see a person like Bahya, he just takes him and throws him in the cold, icy waters of Panya. That shocks him into reality and becomes the fastest arahant with the shortest statements. So, in this manner, the bhikkhu, by not thinking about nor becoming lost in memories of village life, sannyas, in this case, memories, associations, he might look at himself and say, he complains like, okay, well, especially if it's in the afternoon. In the village life, they're going to eat, perhaps, evening meal, Maybe there's some dancing, some music, some sitar playing somewhere. So he's deprived of that if he has attachments, thanks to the mental associations, not just memories, because mental association includes memories, but also what I'm doing with my mind now, with my current situation and conditions. So memories are there, but mental association can also function, even though it's triggered by memories, by using whatever is happening now in the mind. And usually what this refers to is papanchas, mental proliferation. So you keep on constructing new ideas, new images. Manana, you constantly make up stuff. So lost in memories of village life or the people in it, gives his attention instead to the single perception, that of being in a wild, remote wilderness. So he leaves all those mental associations and he comes back to looking at being in a remote wilderness. I'm far away from them. I'm away from the village. Okay, so maybe I have a kuti, maybe I'm living under a tree. Well, there isn't that sound of the sitar. Maybe there's the sound of the birds. So you're already relinquishing things as you're doing that, perceptions of things. By having only this single perception of being in a remote wilderness, his mind springs forward to it with confidence, becomes bright and gets settled in it. And he understands how whatever agitation there might have been in him on account of the perception of village now is no longer present in him. Similarly, whatever agitation there might have been in him on account of the perception of people now is no longer present in him. So he's no longer thinking about Tom, Dick, and Harry over there in the village. Oh, yes, we were buddies. Yes, we had so many times when people meditate, what do they think about? What they're missing, what they could be doing, what they really experienced in the last retreat, or what they were hoping to be experiencing in this retreat. All of which have to do with the other than what's happening now. So here he has cut off himself from all of these imagery and just brought himself to the present, being this remote jungle wilderness where he is by himself. That's why seclusion is a mandatory factor to experience the jhanas. And the jhanas are used to familiarize you with these subtle states where you cannot think about the village life and be in a jhana. Something's got to give. So I had people who say, well, why can't I be passionate and live in life and still experience nibbana? And that's what people teach you. Eckhart Tolle, all these characters making millions of dollars per year, what are they doing? They give you this and this. You can have the cake and eat it too. Who doesn't like that? That's what Rajneesh was doing. Every guru does. Satguru goes around, does this and that, and plays golf and says the F word left and right. People worship the guy. Why? Because he's catering to the flavors of today without depriving anything, and uses this term, that term, so you feel like, oh, yeah, he's deep. Yeah, sure. Yeah, he's not saying you have to stop being so lost in a lay life and all of these things and not be secluded. We have to check. We have to check. What is it that I'm actually relying on as my source of knowledge, as my source of truth? Is it my sensual lusts? And that's what the world gives us. And that's what you are turning your back on temporarily when you come to a retreat. Hopefully you'll take something from the retreat where you can continue being secluded at certain intervals in your life, where you can still benefit and experience nibbana as a lay person. You're not being asked to go ahead and wear the robes. That's not the goal. primary goal is for you to experience freedom from suffering. As a lay person, you can experience that. Please remember. Then the only agitation that he would notice within him would be that of a single perception of being in a remote wilderness. So his thought becomes only revolving around the fact that he is in his kuti, in a remote place. No disturbances. Not just of cows and cattle and pigs and things running around, but from his thoughts, remember, there's a difference here. Because if you've ever gone on a retreat, if you've ever isolated yourself in a jungle or somewhere, even for an hour, but then you realize that you have been carrying your thoughts with you, your worries with you. So this jungle means nothing. You have brought the metropolitan city with you into this lovely, quiet place. Lord Buddha is not saying that. He's saying there's only one thought the bhikkhu has. He's here, that's it. His reality is only this. He's not even thinking about the other bhikkhu about a kilometer away in another kuti. He's not even thinking how Joey's doing over there. He's not. He's here, that's it. He then knows and sees how this agitation is empty of the perception of village and the people in it. However, he also understands that there nevertheless is agitation. There's a slight movement. Yesterday I was talking about how even if you have the tiniest little thought, it creates friction, it creates heat, it creates tension in the brain. Remember, the mind uses the brain as its organ. Every time you have a thought, every time you have a sanya, it's triggering some movement. There's activity, agitation. But that is due to being in a remote wilderness. So he sees and understands that when the agitation causing factors are not present, then emptiness is perceived. And whatever remains there, he perceives as this is still present. Ananda, in this manner, the genuine, the unperverted and pure experience of emptiness comes forth within him. It's a step-by-step process. And he's giving us the instructions. The problem is that we bring our own perceptions into the Dhamma. It's like somebody who's doing eye surgery, about to do eye surgery, and they go into the bathroom, go outside, change the car oil, come outside with their hands, bare hands, by the way, and they go straight into the operating room. They say, where's the patient? Give me the scalpel, give me this, give me that, and they go in. Would you like someone like that with dirty hands operating on your eyeball? That's what we're doing whenever we have our own opinions and ideas and we bring them into the Dhamma. Oh, this is what Lord Buddha is trying to say with my perception, including in the retreat. Furthermore, Ananda, the bhikkhu, by not thinking about people or of being in a remote wilderness, so you give up the idea of village life, like that bhikkhu, but you also give up the idea, the presence of thought that I am in a remote wilderness. You're giving up that idea, that thought as well. He gives instead the attention to the single perception, that of solid earth. Solid earth. There's this ground. This means that the meditator still is on shaky ground in his mind. You need something as a substrate. You know, these things over here, my bag, this, the cords, the computer, the bell, all these things have to have a resting place. Substrate, something to land on. If you take the table away underneath, these things will fall. In the mind of a person who is not yet prepared, and you're removing one perception after another, it's very uncomfortable, if not dangerous. So slowly, Lord Buddha is guiding the person So now you remove the idea of a remote wilderness as well, but hey, you still are grounded. So he's talking about grounding 2,600 years ago. Now it's a big deal in the world. Oh, grounding this, grounding mat, grounding pillow, grounding shoes. People are making money left and right. Grounding. But this is a deeper kind of a sense of grounding, because the meditator is using the solid earth. In other words, a person might say he's talking about Patavi, or the Rupa Sannyas. We were talking about Nama Rupa, the four great elements for the Rupa section. Solidity. Doesn't have to be just earth. Solid things. By having only this single perception of solid earth, his mind springs forward to it with confidence, becomes bright, and gets settled in it. Again, the agitation is missing. If you have agitation, the mind is shaky. There's no tranquility of mind, pasandhi there. Remember when we talked about satta bhojangas? So that is important for you to go into samadhi. But it's like acclimating. When you're climbing a high mountain, there's less oxygen there. So if you're a good mountaineer, you've done your lessons right, you're experienced, you know that you have to take a few steps, maybe a few meters down, maybe more, and then go up less, maybe 1 or 2 meters. But you have to always, be advancing, but you go back to create enough oxygen intake so your brain can expand, your lungs can expand, your brain can process the lack of oxygen, which you're used to at sea level. Otherwise, the pain is excruciating in the head and the body. So similarly here, Lord Buddha is slowly taking you forward, like 3 steps forward, 2 or 1 step back. But there's this advancement, you see that taking place. Just as the bull's hide becomes free from any crinkles or creases, becoming smooth when stretched by 100 pins fastening it. When they skin an animal, the hide, in order for it to not curl up, in order for it to still be stretched and wearable, usable, whatever, they will wet it, they will really get it like in water and things. And then they have these structures, like wooden or something, and they will pull the hide by having it like a needle and twine or strings, and they will pull it. So you have hundreds of nails sometimes holding and stretching the skin, the hide of the animal. And that's how they used to make manuscripts and things in old times. So that's what he's referring to, fastening it. In a similar way, the bhikkhu, by not paying attention to the various terrains, hills, inaccessible gorges, rivers, ravines, thick forests, rugged mountains, and other uneven topographical features of earth, gives his attention instead to the single perception, that of solid earth. So basically what Lord Buddha is saying, he's becoming more inclined towards nippapancha, the opposite of having papanchas. Papancha loves to go and look at, remember earlier I was saying mental proliferation, spreading ideas. When he hears this, the bhikkhu might say, oh, you want me to think about solid earth? Okay, there's a tree over there. Oh, it's an apricot tree. Okay, there's a hill. Oh, there's a lovely pond there. There's some nice geese there. Okay, yeah, I like to go and sit there. Yes, there's some mango trees. No. Forget about all these details. It's not important. You look at what the earth represents. Solidity, period. Don't be, again, he's taking the person away from sanya, not throwing him into the army of sannyas. Just narrowing it down. And he understands how whatever agitation there might have been in him on account of the perception of people now is no longer present in him. Similarly, whatever agitation there might have been in him on account of the perception of being in a remote wilderness now is no longer present in him. So no more thoughts about village life, no more about remote wilderness life. then the only agitation that he would then notice within him would be that of the single perception of solid earth. He then knows and sees how his perceiving is empty of the perception of people, also a remote place. And there nevertheless is agitation still. But that is due to the perception of solid earth, because he still is using something. He still is using an object, something tangible, a substrate. Even though it's more and more subtle, it's still agitation. So this means that the bhikkhu is going deep. Sometimes people reach the fourth jhana, but because they've never experienced upekkha on that level, they say, oh, you can now refer to me as an arahant. Thank you very much. I have reached. Thank you very much. No. Or the fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth jhana. Oh, yes, now I'm a holy of holies. No. Simply, you are past the point where you were at. And that's why we practice to understand panya, wisdom. Wisdom, remember Dhamma Vichaya I mentioned in the Satta Bhojangas? That is the thing which is going to knock you down with a 10,000 ton boulder and shake you into reality and says, no, you're not an arahant yet because you still have agitation. But for that to happen, people need to be honest with themselves and truthful. Unfortunately, everybody's trying to have students around them, and they look at the students, they look at the numbers, they look at the followers, how much love is coming at them. They're like, well, okay, I must be an arahant. And yeah, okay. They never have time to probe their mind and their hearts to see, do I really fill the bill? Am I really? Or is there agitation? Yesterday I was talking about people who just practice the Vinaya and think that that's it. No, that's the fastest way to corrupt the Dhamma. If you neglect the Dhamma and simply focus on the Vinaya and thinking you're doing something good. Why? Because remember the example of the Mahatera who got to this famous monastery in Europe with the van at night, I was telling you, from Thailand, 16, 20 hours later, and it's cold, and you have one bhikkhu and you have one nun trying to reach over and trying to open the door, and whoop, one person's hand is touching the other, they pull back, ooh, I'm sorry, and they, meanwhile, the Mahatera is freezing inside the car. Tell me there is no agitation there. Of course there is. So rules and the Vinaya, rules specifically for bhikkhus, are not meant to agitate the mind. But I guarantee you, almost every single case where there's a lack of Dhamma and the person is holding up the Vinaya and saying, I'm a Vinaya teacher, I follow the Vinaya, we are of that school, I guarantee that there's agitation in the mind. Guarantee it. And the best example of that is Ajahn Mun, who said, you don't need to be fixated on any of those. Use the mind precept. People are like, huh? Mind? That's the most important rule, training rule. You train the mind and you're covered every aspect of the Vinaya rules. Because while you practice the control, the understanding, the placement of the mind as primary focus, you're also practicing the Dhamma. Dhamma, Vinaya go like this. It's like someone having two beautifully functioning legs, Dhamma, Vinaya, and they say, no, I'm going to practice the Vinaya. It's like them going and getting a chainsaw and chopping off one of them legs. It's a ridiculously stupid, but it's laziness. Comes from there. Ignorance. Ditti, remember? So, I deviate. Let's go back. So the solid earth remains in the perception, and that's it. And he knows this, and this is why he says this is still present. Ananda, in this manner also, the genuine, the unperverted and pure experience of emptiness comes forth within him. Again, Ananda, the bhikkhu, by not giving attention to the perception of being in a remote wilderness, nor being in the perception of solid earth, gives his attention instead to the single perception, that of infinity of space. So now we are talking about the arupa jhanas. By having only this single perception of infinity of space, his mind springs forward to it with confidence, becomes bright, and gets settled in it. This is why it's important to have interviews with a teacher, especially on retreats especially, because sometimes you might be having experiences and you don't know what it is. The teacher will guide you. You don't need to panic. Some people panic and get afraid and might even leave the retreat because it just feels weird. They've never experienced something like that, the mind expanding to the point where they experience infinity of space. It's just one of the jhanas, the higher jhanas. And he understands how whatever agitation there might have been in him on account of the perception of being in a remote place now is no longer present in him. Similarly, whatever agitation there might have been on account of the perception of solid earth now no longer is in him. But he notices an agitation, nevertheless, because of the single perception that he has of the infinity of space. Even that has a subtle perception signature. So he's becoming more and more refined. He then knows and sees how his perceiving is empty of the perceptions of being in a remote, etc. So Lord Buddha is repeating this. So he sees and understands that when the agitation-causing factors are not present, then emptiness is perceived, be it the case of the village life, the remote wilderness, the understanding and the perception of the earth, solid earth, and now the infinity of space. That is still present. In this manner, the genuine, unperverted, and pure experience of emptiness comes forth within him. Now, do you see why this is one of the suttas that many people avoid talking about? It's require you to use a lot of brain power, isn't it? It's not as simple as, hey, do dana, yeah. You know, Sigalovada Sutta. That's one of my favorite suttas, from years ago. But you graduate, you move on, you go deeper. You have to. Lord Buddha taught many people from different statuses of society. But he also taught people with the intention of breaking free from their shackles. Today's world, we are caught in our perceptions. We believe our perceptions more than reality. Reality is our perceptions, in fact, isn't it? Instead, he gives his attention to the single perception, that of infinity of consciousness. So this is the next. So fifth jhana, now we're in the sixth jhana. By having only this single perception of infinity of consciousness, his mind springs forward to it with confidence, becomes bright, and gets settled in it. So there is the desire to go in that direction. So one of the things that we do is when you're in a jhana, let's say in the second or third or fourth, any of the jhanas, in fact, you don't think, now I'm going to go into the next one. How come I'm not going into the next one? Oh, I would like to go into the next one. No, leave yourself out of it. You just put the right conditions in place, and you just have this very subtle I wouldn't say aspiration, but kind of like, it would be nice. I'm moving from this to the next one. You don't even say the next jhana. May whatever happen, happen. And then you let it be. But you're not holding on to, let's say, the joy. I have to keep the joy. No. You have to, that's where the teacher comes in. The teacher comes in and says, no, tries to loosen up your fingers from grasping, killing this joy, like holding an animal, like squeezing the life out of it. No. Relax it. It's okay. You didn't know you were going to go into that much joy. You just allowed yourself, and then look what happened. So now, similarly, you need to allow yourself open, 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 constantly open. That requires a lot of trust. Similarly, whatever agitation there might have been in him on account of perception of infinity space now no longer is present in him. But there is agitation, he notices, still, on account of him having the single perception of infinity of consciousness. He then knows and sees how his perceiving is empty of the perception of solid earth, of infinity of space. But he also understands there is nevertheless agitation that is due to the perception of infinity of consciousness. So he sees and understands that when the agitation causing factors are not present, then emptiness is perceived. I need to get some cough drops, so I think I had it. But you never find it when you look for them. There it is. Okay, so further, Ananda, the bhikkhu, I don't like to have cough drops in my mouth when I speak or go over the Dhamma. So I only do this for medicinal purposes, because the throat is hurting. Because it's disrespectful otherwise. Further, Ananda, the bhikkhu, by not giving attention to the perception of infinity of space, nor paying attention to the perception of infinity of consciousness, gives his attention instead to the single perception, that of the base of nothingness. So now we are talking about the seventh jhana. So now the person is getting closer to the experiencing of nothingness. But he's still going to be holding on to a perception. A perception. By having only this single perception of the base of nothingness, his mind springs forward to it with confidence, becomes bright, and gets settled in it. We must have a sense of curiosity. If you didn't have curiosity, you wouldn't be here today, would you? Especially when you have to sit. Emphasis on have to. Although I try to keep it flexible of the schedule. I'm not too rigid. They're like, 1 hour of sitting, 1 hour of walking, 1 hour of sitting. That's nonsense. There was no such rule at the time of Lord Buddha. To be more organic, but you must be curious as to what might happen. So that is what's happening here. That's how the bhikkhu is moving from one stage to the next. Otherwise, they are stuck. And so he understands that whatever agitation that used to happen up to this point for all of these phases he went through, they're not happening anymore. However, there is agitation. He notices, because of the single perception of the base of nothingness, the seventh jhana. So he sees and understands that when the agitation causing factors are not present, then emptiness is perceived, and whatever remains there he perceives as this is still present. Even during the time when he's thinking about, the realm of nothingness, that's a perception, but there's a moment where he's it's letting go, it's released, that link to the perception itself, and he's tasting emptiness. So now he's becoming aware of that, but it's so hard to notice because it's too loud. The nothingness itself is, even though it's an exquisite state to be in, where the person, you walk around, there's like nothing going on in your mind. For some people, it's very scary. You go like, what is this? It's like you walked into an empty room for the first time in your life. There's nothing, no walls, no nothing, no ground, no ceiling, but you're there, nothing's happening to you. And then suddenly you have to exert energy to think about something. They're not coming, the thoughts, on their own. You have to coax them. Hey, come. Make this empty room into something more intelligible. but it's still agitation. That's what Lord Buddha is saying. Ananda, in this manner also, the genuine, the unperverted and pure experience of emptiness comes forth within him. Further, Ananda, the bhikkhu, by not giving attention to the perception of infinity of consciousness, nor to the base of nothingness, gives his attention instead to the single perception, that of the base of neither perception nor non-perception. The state, this is the eighth jhana, by the way. Neva sanya na sanya. So basically, the person does not know whether in that jhana or not until they're out of it. It's a very tricky state. So usually you need to have a teacher to ask you a whole bunch of questions, because otherwise the person might think they were asleep, or Tinamida was coming and going and just, so the teacher has to ask, observe their behavior, ask them a whole bunch of questions to see whether they're in it or not. By having only this single perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception, his mind springs forward to it with confidence, becomes bright, and gets settled in it. And he understands how whatever agitation there might have been in him on account of the perception of infinity of consciousness are no longer in him. Similarly, of the nothingness, base of nothingness. However, he notices that there is still the single perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception functioning in him, which is creating agitation. Even though it's a very, very subtle state. The person might think they are now arahants. The mind is very calm. Many, many teachers in the past, lamas, sayadaws, Bantes, Ajahns, have all, at some point, many of them, those, when I say all, it's a stumbling block. That's why the teacher must be there, and there needs to be easy access to the suttas by the person somehow to see and to check and recheck. The Dhamma will validate or invalidate the experience. The suttas, that's why they're absolutely essential for us to go back to, not the commentaries, because most of the commentators have never experienced any of this, not even the first jhana. Buddhaghosa being one of them, Venerable Buddhaghosa. So you need to go to the suttas to get your answers. That's why you go to a medical doctor if you're not feeling well. You don't say, oh, this must be it. No, yes. So he notices that there nevertheless is agitation, but it is due to the causing factors. It is due to him being in the eighth jhana. He sees and understands that when the agitation causing factors are not present, the emptiness is perceived, and whatever remains there he perceives as this is still present. There's an underlying theme going on. This is still present. Even if the factors are removed of him being in neither perception nor non-perception. Ananda, in this manner also, the genuine, the unperverted and pure experience of emptiness comes forth within him. Again, which requires trust. So this was the whole 8 jhanas. Now we understand, in a sense, how Lord Buddha's processing was when he was a bodhisattva. Now you're going to get a glimpse of what happened. This is another roundabout way of seeing what happened. Further, Ananda, the bhikkhu, by not giving attention to the perception of the base of nothingness, nor paying attention to the perception of neither perception nor non-perception, gives his attention instead to the single perception, that of the signless collectedness of the heart. That's how I translated it. In Pali, it is the animitta ceto samadhi. Lord Buddha used 2 terms interchangeably, depending on the context, which some teachers have misunderstood completely. So one is cheta, or chitta rather. The other one is the mind, mano, the brain, the mind. Mind, brain, there was no distinction. Remember, this is different than mana. Mana is conceit. When we say manovinyana, what is that? Mind consciousness. So some teachers have used the mind, English-speaking, translators, they've used the word mind for both. Cheto, samadhi, or chitta, and mano as mind. But Lord Buddha specifically puts an effort at some places to say, in this case, perfect example, Cheto, samadhi. Animitta. Animitta means the signless. Signless. There's no more sign. So if you come to me and say, oh, Bhante, I'm hearing voices, and when in my deep, deep meditation, or I'm seeing lights, we're talking about signs. Bhante, I see images. I see pictures of aliens. I see pictures of devas. I see shapes. I'm not saying the meditator is making up stuff. No. They might genuinely be seeing things reflected through the mind. Guess what? They are all signs. So we never put too much credence, too much attention on them. Nibbana is not there, is not in them. It's on the other side of that sign, whatever it is. Sometimes they can be very moving and touching, juicy. I mean, come on, it doesn't happen. Bhante, I see rainbow colors and it's a dark room. How is that possible? And I've been meditating and I really give my heart out to my heart to this technique. This must be genuine, Bhante. Yes, but classic case of yes, but. It's a sign. Is that why you want to be on this path, to see some lights? Really? Go get yourself a disco light, hang it around, and put some things on it, and go and see as many lights as you want. Signs we have to go beyond, transcend. So he gives his attention instead to the signless perception, that of the single perception, that of the signless collectedness of the heart. Animitta Cheto Samadhi. By having only this single perception of the signless collectedness of heart, remember I didn't say concentration. You will have people translate that as concentration, the signless concentration of the mind or something. This would be out of context. Lord Buddha uses cheto. That's why I like to use the word heart, because there's a lot of intuitive processing that needs to take place in the practice of meditation. The trust. In the 90s, they discovered, scientists have discovered, excuse me, anywhere from 40 to 50,000 neurons in a different organ than the brain. They discovered it in the heart, out of all places. Now they are unique to the heart. You will not find them in the brain. They are specific to the heart. When I heard this, I was like, wow. Almost 50,000 neurons. The interesting thing is that they do not necessarily communicate with the neurons further up north. Today, someone was asking about upekkha. One way of looking at upekkha is to see the harmony finally coming in tune, the resonance. Resonance, as I was saying earlier, is when two frequencies match each other. So because the mind and the heart don't communicate, the intuitive awareness and the mind, they don't communicate. In the case of a person whose satta bojjhangas are balanced, There's harmony between the mind and the heart. You can think of it like that. Now, somebody might say, well, where is that in the suttas? It's not. This is something that when I teach and I look at the suttas and I look at my own experiences and I look how the brain functions and how people are coming and reporting this and that, all this data put together along with science data, this and that, and what I see in the suttas being taught by Lord Buddha, then I can go ahead and make these conclusions, if you will, as to how it could be taking place. Now, the person can go ahead and test it out and see if that works for them as well. And that's all that a teacher can do. Ultimately, is there agitation in the mind? And upekkha's presence means there's no agitation. You can even think of the two hemispheres of the brain. When they harmonize, synchronize, work beautifully together. That's also a way to look at upekkha. It's not indifference. It's not being, oh, I'm not fazed. I'm okay. I'm like, yeah, whatever happens, it's okay. It's so lifeless to me, the way that is represented. No. I had one teacher who said, oh, arahants can never really smile or even like, be joyful. Why is that? Why punish the arahants like that? What did they do to you? Like, where'd you get that from? Lord Buddha says in the Dhammapada, I believe it was verse 179, he says, we are the happy ones. Well, he's an arahant, Over 1,000 arahants showed up a few days ago, basically the 6th of March. Yes. And there was no text message sent to them, They just showed up, and everyone was in a different part of India. That's when Lord Buddha gave the ovada, the basics of, the structure that later on became the backbone of the Vinaya. But anyhow, they're human beings. They're alive, They have a pulse. So people have turned the arahant into this lifeless plastic mannequin type of a thing that doesn't feel. Get it wrong completely. So by having only this single perception of the signless collectedness of the heart, his mind springs forward to it with confidence, becomes bright, and gets settled in it. And he understands how whatever agitation there might have been in him on account of the perception of nothingness, then neither perception nor non-perception, they don't exist in him now. However, similarly, whatever agitation there might have been in him on account of the perception of the base of neither perception is now no longer present in him. Then the only agitation that he would then notice within him would be that of the 6 sense spheres that are dependent on this body and conditioned by life itself. This is the burden that the bhikkhu has to carry at that point on. That means the 6 sense spheres, the eye and visible objects, the ear and the audible sounds, the nose and smells, the tongue and flavors, tactile objects and the body, the mind and the thoughts. Now that doesn't mean that he is taken on a ride whenever one of these comes into view. But if you've ever been in a traffic, and Kuala Lumpur is one of the, especially in midweek, right? Or in the weekdays, you know what that is. If you've ever been to Jakarta or Bali and you are stuck in the traffic jam of, I don't know, millions of motorbikes on the road, you see how it is burdensome to see. You hear how painful it is to hear. It's too much. for the mind that is becoming more and more settled in the signless. And this is one of the reasons why a person who is going deeper and deeper and deeper seeks out seclusion. Otherwise, it's very, very painful to leave the house, because that means they're now going to be susceptible to all the six sense spaces. And they can't help it because they still occupy a body. It's not like the bhikkhu is against life, but it's a chore. So what do? If they really have to be in a car or being driven somewhere, you close your eyes to save yourself from the pain. This is one example. So let's continue. He then knows and sees how his perceiving is empty of the perception of the base of nothingness. Also, it is empty of the perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception. However, he also understands that there nevertheless is agitation, but that is due to the perception of the six sense spheres that are dependent on this body and conditioned by life itself. So he sees and understands that when the agitation causing factors are not present, meaning he's either dead or he's in a dark room, there's no views or something, he closes his eyes, there's nothing, or no noise. That's another reason why they like to be in secluded areas away from noise. Then the emptiness is perceived, and whatever remains there, he perceives as this is still present. Ananda, in this manner also, the genuine, the unperverted, and pure experience of emptiness comes forth within him. Further, Ananda, the bhikkhu, by not giving attention to the perception of the base of nothingness, nor paying attention to the perception of base of neither perception nor non-perception, he gives attention instead to the single perception, that of the signless collectedness of the heart. He's still talking about the Animitta Ceto Samadhi. By the way, you will come across a term called Animitta Ceto Vimutti, the liberation, release of the heart. Through the signless. That's also a term that we come across in the suttas. In this case, it is the samadhi, the training that will get the bhikkhu, the person, to experience that. By having only this single perception of the signless collectedness of the heart, his mind springs forward to it with confidence, becomes bright, and gets settled in it. And he sees and understands how even this state of signless collectedness of the heart is itself dependent on conditions. He's not there yet. It's still based on conditions. Being artificially prepared, sankata in Pali, where we get the term sankhara. That's why Bhante Jnanananda would use the word preparation. Preparation. Like I was answering Anna's question about vachi sankhara, the subvocal speech. Well, before it becomes actual speech, vocal speech, out of your mouth, it has been prepared in the oven of your thinking. That's the sankata portion. You're preparing it. So he says here, it is still prepared because he's intending to enter into that signless. He's staying into that signless state of samadhi. He's not an arahant yet. Made possible through the volitional means of thought. You have to sit down and say, determine, and say, now I'm going to enter into the Animitta Ceto Samadhi. Knowing full well that whatever is conditioned and volitionally produced is inevitably impermanent and sooner or later will come to an end. Even that Samadhi will come to an end. On seeing this directly through understanding, then his heart finds release. This is when it becomes vimutti from the mental contaminant of sensual desire, the mental asava of becoming, bhava asava, kamasava, bhava asava, and avijjasava, and the mental contaminant of ignorance. One has to see the conditionality of whatever it is that is taking place. Even if it's such a sublime state of mind, where the person can easily be fooled. That's why your sati has to be so sharp so subtle, that even in those states, you need to be applying Dhamma Vichaya. Earlier, someone asked me, where's Vichi, you asked me about Dhamma Vichaya. This is applying Dhamma Vichaya even past the point of the 8th jhana. Because he's not an arahant yet at that point. Now he is. Because he has seen, thanks to the investigation. But you cannot see clearly on this level without the presence of upekkha. Upekkha balances it. That's why the whole bojjhangas need to be balancing each other. Otherwise, it's too much agitation. You can't see. Too much going on. So because of that, seeing the conditionality and the impermanence of it. Impermanent because the moment he relinquishes that subtle desire to be in that samadhi, all thing comes apart. So it's conditioned, which means it's impermanent. Okay. But that seeing means he has reached the place of understanding that is so deep, it's so punya. That's when he cracks through. He just tears open that veil. And he declares, being released thus, the direct knowledge arises in him. I'm released, as he understands and knows it for himself. Now birth is finally destroyed. The holy life is fully lived. What should be done is now done, and there is no more coming to any state of becoming. And he understands how whatever agitation there might have been in him on account of the mental contaminants of sensual lust now are no longer present in him. Similarly, whatever agitation there might have been seen in him on account of the mental contaminant of becoming, bhavasava, now are no longer present in him. Similarly, whatever agitation there might have been in him on account of the mental contaminant of ignorance now are no longer present in him either. Then the only agitation that he would then notice within him would be that of the 6 sense spheres. He still has a body. And that's why the arahants, based on what I've read in the suttas again and again, once they become arahants, it is really difficult to still remain in this body. You might see also places where they're almost asking for death to show up. They're like, please, come on, like, like in the case of Venerable in the Punna, in the Punnovada Sutta. He wants to go to a place where there are notoriously dangerous people there without Dhamma. And Lord Buddha says, what if they beat you? Oh, at least they don't attack me with rods and sticks. He says, what if they attack you with rods and sticks? Oh, Bhante, then I'll say, at least they're not cutting me in pieces with knives. And Lord Buddha says, what if they do cut you to pieces with knives? Oh, then and Lord, I would be glad that they're not cutting my head off. Something like that. And he says, okay, what if they cut your head off? And then I would say, Bhante, oh, I've been trying so hard to get rid of this body. Oh, these people here, they're so compassionate because they've gotten me rid of this body, finally. And Lord Buddha smiles and says, now you're ready, you may go to that place. But he was not an arahant yet. So he goes there and he becomes a noble disciple, he becomes an arahant, and he also turns those people in that violent so-called countryside into devout Buddhists. They even some of them become noble disciples. So he was one of those courageous ones. But then he does get killed. So not by those 500 Buddhists, but somebody somewhere, But fortunately, he was an arahant when he died. So I'm sure it was like good news for him. He knows and sees how his perceiving is empty of the mental contaminant of sensual lust and is no longer present in him, empty of mental contaminant of becoming, etc., etc. He therefore understands that there is in him this state of non-empty presence that is due to the perception of the six sense spheres that are dependent on this body and conditioned by life itself. He sees and understands that whatever is thus not present, then emptiness is perceived, and whatever remains there he perceives as this is still present. Ananda, whatever recluses, Ananda, this itself is the bhikkhu's genuine, unperverted, and pure experience of emptiness that comes forth within him, which is transcending and supreme. Ananda, whatever recluses and Brahmins who in the past have entered into and remained in the transcending state of genuine, unperverted, pure, and supreme emptiness, they all have done so by entering into and remaining in this same transcending state of genuine, unperverted, pure, and supreme emptiness. All, he says, all of them have gone through this. Whatever recluses and Brahmins who in the future will enter into and remain in the transcending state of emptiness, genuine, unperverted, pure, and supreme emptiness, they all will do so in the future by entering into and remaining in this state, same transcending state of genuine, unperverted, pure, and supreme emptiness. And that was the past, then the future. Now, whatever recluses and Brahmins who currently enter into and remain in the transcending state of genuine, unperverted, pure, and supreme emptiness, they will all do so they do so by entering into and remaining in this same transcending state of genuine, unperverted, pure, and supreme emptiness. Therefore, Ananda, you should train yourselves in this manner by reflecting. We too will enter into and remain in the transcending state of genuine, unperverted, pure, and supreme emptiness. This is what the Blessed One said, and the Venerable Ananda was delighted in listening to the Blessed One's words. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Well, there you have it, the Cūḻa Suññatā Sutta. For some, it might be too much, but then this sutta is not for them. However, the keys to Nibbana, Lord Buddha constantly provides, not just in this sutta, in all kinds of different suttas. And they don't necessarily have to be deep, but I chose to talk about the Suññatā Sutta because I would like to extend the life of the sasana as much as we can. So now this is recording and it's going to be there for posterity, and you can access it. And the Dhamma is rich, but there are many, many places where there are treasures buried with maps that were there once, or people who knew how to get to them. X marks the spot, but they are dead and gone, and those treasures are left hidden. Fortunately, this treasure is still available, the treasure of Dhamma. It takes a Buddha to discover it. Let us not wait for the treasure to be lost again, for eons to pass, so that somehow we might have gained some merits to be born at the time of that Buddha in a future life, sometime, somewhere in the future, far distant. And no, Maitreya is not coming this year, nor next. Sorry. For those millions and millions of Buddhists who keep praying, chanting beads and stuff, and they're like, don't worry, Maitreya is coming, or I'm going to go and see him in Tushita heaven or something. No, that's not going to happen. You have a body now, a precious human body that works. That works. You have a brain that works. Still. And we have the Dhamma. A treasure is not a treasure when you keep it and you just look at it like a naga and say, it's my treasure, it's my treasure. Oh, my precious, like Lord of the Rings. It's not that. You must do something with it. If I have a tool, in order for that tool to work, I need to apply it, use it. A few supporters, a couple actually, were driving me from one place to where I'm staying. and they passed by a place, a building that is deserted. It's a brand new building. It's almost done. They just need to do the paint job. But it's been like that for years. And it looks dilapidated. It's coming apart. No person has lived in it. There's no furniture yet. Well, a house that is not inhabited will be crumbling very soon if it's not inhabited. Even your presence there, your own gravity, your own weight against gravity will make sure the nails stay in place. The beams will be strengthened. You use the house. You don't use your clothing, the bugs come and eat it. And next time you take them out, and it's like, oh, nice, nice. Oh, wait a minute. What is all these holes in them? We must practice the Dhamma in order for the Dhamma to really shine in our lives. So that is my encouragement to you. So are there any questions? We have students on Zoom joining us from, around the world. I see Malaysia, I see Japan, Armenia, Finland, UK. Nice. And Malaysia again, yes. So any questions, thoughts, either online or yes. No. No. Yes. So the question was, Bhante, this means that the Arahant, in order for him to be an Arahant, needs to reach the 8th jhana. Brother Tia was asking, and I said, no. However, getting into the 1st jhana, at the very least, really acclimates you, prepares your mind. Now, do you even need to be in the jhana? No. No. But you must have the ability to experience the level of samadhi necessary. When I mentioned about Venerable Bahia, he had just run about 700 miles in 3 days from Mumbai, a little bit north of Mumbai, all the way to Savatthi. 700 miles. Only stopping to go to the bathroom and maybe get a little bit of a nap before collapsing. So he got to Savatthi. And you can imagine, he knows the Buddha is alive. He knows he's there, and is like, he's going to Jeta's grove. He's like, where's the Buddha? Where's the Buddha? Where's the Buddha? He's like, okay, he's not here. He went on Pindapada. He just rushes into the city. He finds Lord Buddha. He's bowing down. He says, Bhante, Bhante, please, please, give me a teaching. Give me a teaching. His mind is very agitated. Lord Buddha does not give him instructions. Some people were wondering, why did Lord Buddha not give him instruction? Oh, it was like almost like hard to get. No. He was first and foremost the top teacher in humanity has ever seen. So he knew what the mind, the quality of the mind of the student needs to be. He says, Bahya, now is not the time. The Tathagata is on Pindapada. Not now. He says, Bhante, please, 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 I request teachings. He says, Bahya, now is not the time. Meanwhile, he's breathing less and less heavily. The mind is becoming more tranquil. Remember, he had reached high states of jhana in his previous lives. He was a bhikkhu. So his mind was now remembering those states. So don't think that you have to reach the 8th jhana. That's what I'm trying to say. Because when you look at Bahya and how he gained arahantship right on that spot, because he asks one more time and he says, Bhante, I don't know how long of a life I have. And I don't know how long the Tathagata will be alive. Please, please, Lord, give me the teaching. And Lord Buddha says, Bahya, when seeing, just see. When hearing, just hear. When experiencing, just experience. Nothing else. Don't add anything. I'm actually adding words, paraphrasing. Lord Buddha said far less. And at that moment, Bahya Daruchirya, the bark cloth wearing yogi, because he had thought that he was an arahant in Mumbai until one of his friends, who was an anagami from the pure abodes, showed up in his, I think in his sleep, and he said, "You're not an arahant, you're nowhere near arahantship. You're on the wrong path." He says, "Really?" He says, "Yes. Is there someone in the world that can guide me, can show me?" He says, "Yes, you're fortunate enough to be born at a time when there's a Lord Buddha." He says, "Where is he? Where is he?" He says, he's in Savatthi." "Where? Savatthi here." "Okay, that's all he needs." Gets up immediately. He doesn't wait for morning. And he starts running in the direction of Savatthi, across India. It's a huge country, India. And Venerable Bahya's mind now is so ready, calm. That calmness is necessary. That's why I said earlier today, no agitated mind could experience Nibbana. It's impossible. You cannot. That's why you might be in a 1 month long dry Vipassana retreat, or 3 months, or a year long so-called Satipatthana retreat, but your mind is like you're fighting like this against hindrances. There's agitation. You're like frowning. And you're thinking you're actually advancing. Is there agitation in the mind? That should be your question. Because agitation in the mind means there definitely is attachment to something. And what does that attachment usually come in the package of? Sanya. Sanya. Sanya can come in the form of a Vinaya rule. Sanya could come in the form of a teaching that you might have come across in the suttas that you worship and say, "Ah, this is it, and the only thing, this is it, at the exclusion of everything else, including reality." It shows rigidity. If you're rigid, you're going to be agitated. So that's one way of looking. But in answer to your question, you do not need to experience the 8th jhana to attain arahantship. Any questions, further questions? Oh, there's one here, I think. From Sophie. Thank you, Bhante. When Ananda, perceiving the emptiness, was there metta in his heart? Was there metta in his heart? The way I see the Dhamma, metta goes with the Dhamma like this. Because you must always have, you cannot have relaxed step without metta, at some level of metta. Which I might be saying metta, but you can also understand it as the presence of forgiveness. The person who has advanced that much, still having an agitation, can become hopeless depending on their past. One is very much morphed and molded by one's own past, remember. That's what I said earlier, how we attach ourselves to our past. Stories, narratives, paradigms, the way we see the world, points of view. So him experiencing agitation, they'll say, "Oh, I'm an embarrassment to my teacher." Oh. That is a nut. That's a new perception. That definitely needs the eraser of metta to come. And you need to erase that. Because we all have been hurt. We forget that. Somehow when we come to the Dhamma, we think, oh, it's a clean slate, everything is new, we're good. The Dhamma is going to heal everything. No! That's why in many cases, I recommend still to people to go and see a therapist. Sometimes your wounds are so deep, or at least give you some tools for you to go ahead and either journal, go in a place where you are very vulnerable, like travel somewhere by yourself, or go on a hike, be alone a little bit, to discover different aspects of yourself, to pull you out of that story of I am wounded trauma. So many times people come and they expect the Dhamma to come with his whiteout. You know, when you're typing in the old days, you put whiteout and it's like, yeah, it's brand new. Yes, don't look too closely. You'll see it. So the Dhamma whiteout, there's no such thing. If anything, the Dhamma reveals everything. But we must have the tools. So one of the best tools comes in the form of the metta. So absolutely, that's how I see it. Metta must be there because the presence of metta in one's heart means the heart is healing or has already healed. And when they have already healed, that means they are ready for emptiness to be experienced. That's why you cannot just jump into giving metta to an enemy from the start. I have to guide it slowly. Slowly, once you've used it and now it's so pervading, metta, then slowly we go to a neutral person, not in the same sitting, but we know this. And then eventually, when the teacher sees it's right time, slowly still, it might take weeks, it might take months. I had once a student who took him 3 months for them to get to the point where I said, now is time for you to use only one enemy. And the one with the least problematic stories around them. And they still struggled. Because there's wounds there. And then finally they broke free and they were crying, this and that. So working to heal the heart. Emptiness or nibbana is not going to come and stay in your heart and actually be experienced unless the heart is appropriate for nibbana. When you have a guest coming over to your house, do you leave trash around? Chairs up, turned around and this and that? No, you make sure everything is clean as they could be. Maybe light an incense or two. Take a shower at least. Put some deodorant. Clean the place up, and now it's ready to accept guests. We do this with people. But nibbana, that's going to release you from suffering that is unimaginably long. That deserves a little bit more, right? Good. Any other thoughts before we close for the day? Yes, TV.
Extend the metta practice into the life.
Who's closest to you? Who is, sorry, in case you haven't heard the question, how does one extend metta through one's own daily life? Away from the cushion. And who is closest to you, TP? I believe you have someone closer to you than the dogs. Closer than them. Ah, bingo. You. Have you ever looked at yourself in the mirror before you left your room or your house? How did you gaze upon yourself before you walked outside into the world?
I check my hair.
Ah. From now on, I would like you to check if you have metta for you, not the hair. Because the hair will actually benefit. So will your spectacles, your clothing, and everything. Because you check to see if you have metta in your heart for you first. You have to give yourself the gift of metta every single day. We are not taught this in school. That's a shame. We are taught algebra and this and that, but we are not taught how to love ourselves. Instead, we are told to go outside and find someone to love us. By the way, they are told the same thing. How could I love anybody if I don't love myself? Tell me. But the interesting thing is, so many people put up a fight when I tell them this. Can you smile to yourself before you leave your house? Oh, they're going to think I'm crazy. I've had people say this. Or some people actually start debating with me. Why do you want me to smile? Why? Why? But it's funny, later on they laugh at themselves because they taste the fruits of how great that makes them feel. So it starts from there. Then slowly, everything you touch with sati and metta go hand in hand. The proper way of doing metta means you're also properly utilizing satipatthana. They are undetachable. So everything you touch, literally, can you touch with metta? Do you cook? You don't cook. Do you wear shoes? Do you wear socks? Next time you wear socks, I would like you to be aware of which foot you're putting the sock on first. And as you're doing so, can you be nicer to your toes? Instead of, oh, I have to rush, or having a phone here, it's like putting it as. See, people think the Dhamma has to be somewhere out there. It's like, yo, it's academic, it's scholarly, you have to know Abhidhamma, you have to know. No. It starts from you, from your house and how you wear your socks. How you treat yourself. How do you walk? Can your feet, when they touch, this is a good exercise. I was watching you do the Shankama earlier. Very good. But as I mentioned yesterday, every time your bare feet touch the ground, imagine the bottom of your foot is kissing the ground. Kissing the ground. Gently, as if you're kissing a baby. Have you ever touched the baby's skin? How do you touch it? So gently. Now, I'm not saying treat yourself like that, but just when you're behaving in life. And that is one way of approaching, of permeating the fragrance of metta throughout your life. You don't have to go around telling people, oh, I practice metta, like some people do. Does that help? Good. And make your smiles genuine. I know I keep saying smile, but ask yourself, do I really want to, go ahead and smile? Check first. And if the answer is no, ask why? Why am I not able to smile to myself? I'm the first person in line to all my negative talk. I'm the closest person I will ever be to myself until you die. I'm the closest friend, not the enemy. So, different ways of looking. Any other thoughts? Okay, so let us transfer some merits. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu lokasasanam. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu desanam. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahidika Punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu mam paranti. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you all be well. May the blessings of the Triple Gem be with you. Make good use of this life. You've worked hard, real hard to get this body. You've kept the precepts in the past intact for at least one lifetime. That's why you are born as a human being. And on top of that, you've done some wonderful, wonderful, wholesome work to be born at the time where the Dhamma of a Buddha, contemporary, 2,600 years, is not too long ago when you think about epochs, eons. So we still have that available, and you are exposed to it. You have come to it. Use this time wisely, please. So I'll see you tomorrow. Be well. Secure it.